Real Country 1430 AM and 1073 FM WRDN. I'm Brian Winnekins, and joining us this morning is Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind as we talk a little bit about some issues going on in D.C. Congressman Kind, thanks for joining us. Well, let's first talk about infrastructure. A lot of stuff happening with that recently passed bill, and I guess one of them is this plan to potentially fix the locks and dams on the upper Mississippi.
Well, first of all, good morning, Brian, and Merry Christmas to you and all the listeners. I hope it's a safe, happy holiday season and chance to get together with families. But let's do so smartly. Hopefully, everyone got their vaccinations against the coronavirus and are protecting themselves and those close to them right now. But yeah, I'm excited about the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I can't think of a better time, Brian, to rebuild Wisconsin, rebuild America than right now, coming out of this coronavirus. The good paying jobs that will come from it, the roads to highways, the bridges that we need, ports and airports, broadband in rural Wisconsin, which is desperate to close the digital divide, and the inland waterway infrastructure, our lock and dam system, and commercial navigation on the Mississippi. That's crucial for our economy here in the upper Midwest. And we're hoping to get a dedicated sum to start with the backlog of maintenance and operation of the lock and dam system, which also is vital to production agriculture, where we're at. So there's a lot in this bill, passed with overwhelming support in the Senate. I was a little disappointed that only 13 of my Republican colleagues supported it in the House, and they opposed it just for political reasons, because this is something that has been nonpartisan in the past. Obviously, with 19 Republican senators supporting it in the Senate, there was really no reason to oppose it, because it was completely paid for. Now, we found offsets to pay for it, so we're not adding to the budget deficits or to our national debt. So it was also a fiscally responsible thing to do too. But I'm glad it's moving forward now.
You met with the inland waterways. Whatever happened to the money that the toll barge operators have been paying over the years? I thought that was for fixing the locks and dams.
It is, and they still are collecting those fees. And it's the one industry that I can think of that's actually saying, hey, tax us more because more work needs to be done on the lock and dam system. You typically don't hear from folks back home like that, but they're genuine and they're offered to, it's a user fee. And they recognize that their industry will be more profitable the more efficient the lock and dam system is for them. So they're willing to pay more. And I've been trying to broker those discussions, and there hasn't been a final agreement yet. But the infrastructure bill will dedicate through the NEST program, the Navigation Environmental Sustainability Program, additional funds to deal with the backlog of maintenance and operation where there isn't enough money being collected through the user fees to deal with. And these locks and dams are Great Depression era. They were built back in the 30s. And so many of them need a major upgrade and modernization to make them efficient.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. With the rural broadband part of this, are there safeguards in place? Because Frontier Communications in Buffalo County, they took the money and did nothing.
Right.
Other national companies have done this as well in the 3rd District. So are there some safeguards in place with this money to say, look, you take it, you must use it. Otherwise, Nelson Telephone or Pierce Pep and Co-op Services that started their own internet service and they're going to get it done, will get it done.
Yeah, I'm worried about that too. And there has to be really strict oversight as far as the use of this money this time. So it doesn't go to these big private companies with promises that aren't kept and they just pocket the money. And then, as the case was with Frontier, declare bankruptcy. And they walk away from whole communities, like up in Mondovi in that region that we've been dealing with for some time. A lot of this money is going to be shuffled through the state and local governments. The PSC in Wisconsin is going to have a say in the distribution of this money too. And we're calling upon them to have proper safeguards to make sure that there is a realistic time frame so that these private companies aren't claiming, yeah, we'll get around to it in 5 or 10 years. And then they never do. But the other thing that we really need to work quickly on, Brian, is getting a good map of where the digital divide is and where the shortfall occurs, so we know where to pinpoint these resources for the maximum value. And that's typically in rural Wisconsin and rural America that's been shortchanged. And it's because, for private industry, that return on investment for that last mile is just not profitable. And so it's going to require a strong public-private partnership to do it. Pep and Pierce just with the telecom companies up there did a really neat partnership with Spectrum Broadband, which seems to be working well. And there are models out there that we can duplicate, so we don't have to recreate the wheel in many instances.
I know that Nelson Telephone here in Durant is looking at potentially expanding into the town of Albany, but that's a frontier area. And so there's a whole lot of red tape here that they have to go through. They have to get permission from the town board. They have to get permission from people. And then they got to get permission from the FCC. And Frontier at any time could say, well, wait, that's our area. But it's pretty obvious Frontier isn't doing it. Can't that be streamlined so Nelson Telecom or another co-op can say, look, we can do this. We can do it now. Sorry, Frontier, you're out.
Yeah, and that's been a battle in Madison, Brian, between the big telecom companies and their legion of lobbyists not wanting that type of competition to come into their area. And I think it's outrageous that that's continuing. So my advice to people back home is to contact your state reps and tell them to break down these monopolies that have dominated the Wisconsin legislature for too long. Also, there's easement rights that have to be garnered too. That's something that the state can easily fix. Especially with our co-ops that already have infrastructure with the electricity that they're providing farms and families and communities in rural Wisconsin. They just need that to be adaptable to broadband expansion now. Not a new footprint, but using an existing footprint. But there's some archaic laws on the book that make it difficult for them to get those easements to connect people. And again, this is at the state level that needs to be addressed. But unfortunately, this telecom industry have a lot of money and they'll spend a lot on the lobbyists in Madison to make sure this stuff isn't done. And it's outrageous and it's taking too long.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. Congressman Kind, there's also some from USDA. There's the new dairy margin insurance program. The sign up for that's coming up. But they've also added in some additional funding for producers that may have had lost dairy cattle because of PFAS contamination, which is a big deal here in Western Wisconsin.
Yeah, and that came from the American Rescue Plan that we passed earlier this year, some additional funding for COVID impacted economic shortfalls. And it's true for the dairy industry as well. So we're trying to address coming out of this pandemic where people were adversely impacted because of this virus and the economic toll that they've taken. So through the rescue plan, we're able to address that. And also the Build Back Better plan that we're still working on will help address the shortfall economically that people are suffering from. And I would also mention, Brian, back to the infrastructure bill, that a large reason why we're seeing inflated prices today is because demand is exceeding supply. And our supply chain has broken down because of the inefficiency of our transportation system. So this infrastructure bill, by alleviating those backlogs, that's holding back truck drivers and ports and airports and the transports of products to where the consumers need it, can also help alleviate the inflationary pressures that we're seeing and the additional costs that families are suffering under right now. So there are multiple reasons why this makes sense right now, not least of which try to get our arms around this inflationary spike and try to bring those prices back down to normal again.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning, with trade and the backup that we have for the dairy industry, this has become kind of serious because it's costing, I think it's like $1 billion in sales over the last year for the dairy industry because we can't get our products out of the country.
Right.
How do we the infrastructure plan is not going to fix the ports tomorrow. How do we fix the ports now?
No, you're exactly right. And it is a challenge that we have to be focused. There's a long and short-term solution. I commend the Biden administration for really doubling down on trying to alleviate port congestion right now through expanded hours and additional resources to help unclog those ports. We've also had a disparity between shipping containers that are full arriving on our shores and many of them returning to their countries empty. We can't tolerate that. So there need to be better coordination in the use of those shipping containers and boats in order to export our product to where it needs to go. And that's lacked coordination in recent years too. And the Biden administration's taking a look at all of this in order to streamline it and make sure it's much better coordinated so we can get those products shipped to where they need to go.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. Congressman Kind, the EPA recently finally announced the RVOs. Your thoughts on that? It's pretty mixed bag here, and it's kind of surprising considering the Biden administration's wanting to have a carbon-free economy. Well, here's something we have right here in renewable fuels that would do just that and lower the prices. But they seem to just be all wrapped up in electric vehicles, and even EPA seems to be that way. And it's like, but wait a minute, your reaction on what EPA's announced?
Yeah, we just had EPA announce the new biofuels blending requirement, first retroactively last year. And I know they were alleviating some of those rules in light of COVID. And listen, all right, that's a one-shot deal, but we don't want to see that backslide made permanently. To the administration's credit now, they said they're going to be able to restore everything back to normal levels by 22. And we want to make sure that it stays there then. So we not only have done a letter and did outreach through phone calls, but we have bipartisan legislation right now in order to protect that biofuel standard. It makes sense on so many levels. I mean, the market needs that certainty. Our producers need that certainty of what the target needs to be that they can hit. If we do this right, the Midwest can become the Middle East as far as our energy with sustainable energy resources. And the good prices that it will bring to our family farmers back home. And it also helps combat climate change. So, I'm in the all the above category, and we need a diversified energy mix if we're going to be realistic and honest with the American people in dealing with climate change, but also what our immediate energy needs are. And biofuels has a role to play, and there's a lot of upside to it.
That legislation you're talking about, would that also tighten up the waiver deal? Because these waivers have become out of control.
Yeah, they really have. And again, there's some pretty powerful interest there. And the oil industry in particular has been a public enemy number one when it comes to biofuels. And listen, their clout is still very strong, very influential here in Washington. And we just need to keep a close eye on them.
That's Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. You're listening to Real Country 1430 AM and 107.3 FM WRDN.